They called her a criminal, but she was just a girl with a soft soul, crossing the border with torn feet and a heart made of paper. She came alone, no name, no promises, carrying a silence that didn't belong to her, but to the women before her, the mother she left behind, the grandmother who died waiting on a visa, the neighbors who became statistics. She wasn't looking for revenge, she was looking for home. The sun scorched the skin off her shoulders. The desert was hotter than the hell she already knew, but she kept walking, hands on her belly, protecting a life that had no name yet. In her backpack, a fake ID, one change of clothes, and a broken crucifix, given by an aunt who said, "If God don't come for you, maybe he'll come for this child." She believed it, and that's why, when the blood ran down her legs, when the contractions tore through the night, she didn't scream. She lay on the dirt, wrapped the baby in a used t-shirt, and prayed without a sound. The next morning, under the high sun, she found a small church, door wide open, wooden cross, no people, just God. She left the baby on the altar, with a crumpled note that read, "Forgive me, save him," and she walked away, barefoot, bleeding, alone. Days later, immigration agents caught her on a street in Tucson. No fight, no lies, just silence. In court, a white judge looked at her like she was some kind of wounded animal. And she said, "This isn't abandonment, it's domestic terrorism, a crime against America. But tell me, what is America when justice can't recognize a prayer? If you've ever felt forgotten or blamed just for trying to survive, stay with me. This story wasn't born to be beautiful. It was born to be told." They never knew his name. Not the pastor who found him. Not the paramedic who carried him. Not the nurse who cleaned the blood off his skin with trembling hands. Just infant Doe, wrapped in a torn t-shirt, with dried tears on his cheeks and a faint smell of dust and prayer. The church was quiet that morning, a kind of holy quiet, as if the walls themselves knew something sacred had happened. The old pastor, Brother Samuel, was the first to see the bundle. He stopped, stared, knees locked, then fell to the ground beside the child, whispering, "Lord, is this what you meant by leave the 99 and find the one?" The baby was breathing, barely, his skin pale, lips dry, but his eyes were open, and in that look there was no fear, no panic, just a strange kind of knowing, like he'd already seen the world for what it was, and survived. They rushed him to the hospital. No papers, no parents, no history, just that crumpled note clutched in his tiny fist. "Forgive me. Save him." The nurses read it. Some cried, some judged. But one of them, Angela, took the paper and placed it inside her Bible, right next to Psalm 91. She didn't know why. She just felt like it belonged there. They placed the baby in NICU, fed him through a tube, wrapped him in blankets that smelled like bleach and bureaucracy, and still he didn't cry, not once. Doctors said it was trauma, said it was survival instinct. But Brother Samuel, he said something else. He said, "That child ain't crying, 'cause he was born of silence." And he was right. The silence around him wasn't empty. It was full of stories, of women who had to make impossible choices, full of prayers whispered through clenched teeth, full of lullabies that never got to be sung. And so the boy slept, breathed, waited. Meanwhile, his mother sat in a holding cell just a few miles away, her feet still swollen, her eyes dry, her wrists bruised from the handcuffs. No one told her if the baby was alive. No one looked her in the eyes. No one asked why she did what she did, because to them she wasn't a mother. She was a case number, a flight risk, an illegal. She prayed every night, not for herself, but for him. She didn't beg for release. She didn't ask for mercy. She just whispered the same words over and over again. "Let him be safe. Let him be safe. Let him be safe." But what none of them knew, not the judge, not the nurse, not even the pastor, was that someone had taken a photo. A church volunteer, new to the job, shaky hands, posted it online. Just one photo, a baby on an altar, wrapped in a t-shirt, crucifix behind him, note visible, and within hours, it went viral. But not for the reason you'd hope. They didn't see a cry for help. They saw a threat, an invasion, a headline. Illegal immigrant abandons baby in Arizona church. They didn't ask who she was. They didn't ask why. They just pointed, condemned, demanded punishment, and far away in a cell that smelled of metal and old sweat, she heard the guard read the headline out loud, laughed, spat near her feet, and then, for the first time since the desert, she cried, but that cry, it wasn't for her. It was for what they were about to do next. The courtroom was cold, not just from the air conditioner humming too loud, but from the eyes watching her. She sat there, hands cuffed in front of her, belly still sore, ankles still cracked. No translator, no compassion, no time. Her name wasn't even said right. Marisol became Mary Sol, as if they could chop her identity in half and toss the rest to the floor like scraps. The judge was a woman, white, hair tied up too tight, lipstick like blood. And when she looked down at Marisol, it wasn't as a human being. It was as a headline, a problem, a file. The prosecutor read from a paper, said words like abandonment, reckless endangerment, national threat. But not once did he say newborn, fear, desperation, prayer. Marisol didn't understand most of the words, but she felt their weight, heavy like chains, sharp like shame. Her public defender arrived late, tie crooked, eyes tired, didn't ask her name, didn't ask her truth, didn't ask anything. He stood and said, "She doesn't speak English, Your Honor. She pleads not guilty." But he didn't say why. Didn't tell them about the desert, the labor, the church, the note. Didn't tell them she had no choice. So the judge leaned forward, and with a voice as dry as ash, she spoke words that would live in Marisol's bones forever. You people always run from your responsibilities. You think this country owes you grace just because you're poor. But motherhood is not a license to break the law. Then she paused and smiled, like a wolf who'd tasted blood. Leaving a baby in a church isn't an act of faith. It's a crime against America. And just like that, the room froze. Even the bailiff looked away. Even the stenographer stopped typing for a breath. Marisol didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't blink, because somewhere deep inside her, she knew this wasn't justice. This was performance, punishment, pride in robes. They set her bail at $150,000. She had nothing but the crucifix around her neck, and even that they took. So they led her back to the cell, metal doors closing like a coffin, shoes scraping against concrete, chains singing the saddest lullaby. And behind her, someone from the court whispered to a reporter she didn't even ask about the baby. But they didn't know. They didn't know that every night after the guards turned off the lights, Marisol would press her hand against her chest, feel the absence of her son, and whisper his name into the dark, because she had named him, not with ink, but with soul, Isaias, after the prophet, the one who spoke of deserts blooming and justice rolling like a river. She named him Hope. And now, they were trying to erase him the same way they were trying to erase her. But even in the silence of her cell, something was shifting, not loud, not visible, but real, because someone in that courtroom had heard the judge's words, and someone was recording, and that recording was about to find the light. She was just a shadow in the corridor, clipboard in hand, badge on her chest, eyes full of questions no one dared ask. Her name was Olivia, social worker, 13 years on the job, hundreds of cases, thousands of faces, but she remembered Marisol, not because of the file, not because of the headlines, but because of the silence. The way Marisol sat in that cold chair, shoulders low, hands still swollen from the cuffs, eyes fixed on a crack in the floor, as if trying to disappear into it. Olivia had been trained to remain neutral, to follow protocol, to not get involved. But there was something about that girl, something ancient, something holy, like the hush of a church before the choir begins. She'd been standing outside the courtroom when the judge spoke those words. "You people always run from your responsibilities. This isn't faith, it's terrorism." And Olivia felt something tighten in her chest, something ugly, something familiar, because she'd heard that tone before, as a child, when her own mother stood in front of a judge, hands trembling, accused of stealing groceries so Olivia and her sisters wouldn't go to bed hungry. She remembered the coldness in that courtroom too, the way justice had felt like a costume, a performance for those already holding the power. So when Marisol was taken back to her cell, Olivia followed the hallway, not by order, not by duty, but by something else, by guilt. Because she hadn't spoken up, she hadn't challenged the judge, hadn't objected to the language, the venom, the verdict. She had stood silent. And silence, Olivia knew, could be violence too. That night she sat at her desk long after the building emptied out, turned off the lamp, opened Marisol's file, and cried. She cried for the girl who had walked across a desert just to be caged, for the baby left behind on an altar, for the version of herself who once believed the system could be good. Then she reached for her drawer, pulled out an old USB drive, and uploaded something she wasn't supposed to have, the courtroom recording, audio from the moment the judge said, "A crime against America." She listened to it again, and again, and again. Then she whispered, "No." This was a cry for help. Olivia didn't sleep that night. She wrote, anonymously, to a reporter she used to date back in college, said there was something he needed to hear, something the public wasn't supposed to know. She didn't sign the message. She didn't include her name, just the subject line. "This is what injustice sounds like." And attached below it, the recording. By morning, the story had changed. The article was gone, replaced. Now it read, "Leaked audio. Judge calls immigrant mother a terrorist. Where is the baby now? Church abandonment or systemic failure?" And Marisol's name, once just a case number, just another illegal, was now a symbol. But symbols come with cost. Because when Olivia walked into work that morning, she found a letter waiting on her desk. Suspension, indefinite, pending investigation. And in that silence, the same silence she had once been part of, Olivia finally made a choice. She would not be silent again. But just as she packed her things, her phone vibrated. Unknown number, voicemail. She pressed play, and a voice, small, trembling, maybe 5 years old, said, "Is my mama still in the cage?" The boy had been moved again. Second foster home in 3 weeks. No warning, no explanation. Just a cardboard box of donated clothes and a file that called him Isaac Doe. And not Isaias, not the name his mother whispered to the stars as her blood dried on desert sand, not the name carved into her bones with every silent prayer behind bars. They renamed him like he was luggage lost in transit, like he didn't come from someone's trembling hands and a t-shirt soaked in birth. The new home was quiet. Too quiet. No songs, no stories. Just a woman who called him the quiet one, and a man who barely looked up from the TV. They fed him, yes, bathed him, dressed him, but no one held him the way a mother would. No one rocked him when his little hands twitched in the night. No one saw how he turned toward the window every time a plane passed overhead, as if waiting for something, for someone. And every night, as the house went dark, he'd crawl under the thin sheet, press his fingers to his chest, and hum something no one taught him. A melody, broken, wounded, holy. It was the hum of a lullaby Marisol never got to finish. A song passed from womb to skin, from heartbeat to silence. Meanwhile, back in detention, Marisol didn't know where he was. She'd asked, so many times, "Por favor, mi hijo. Isaías, ¿está bien? Please, my son, is he okay?" But they wouldn't tell her. Said it wasn't her right. Said she gave up her claim the moment she stepped on sacred American soil without permission. She screamed once, just once, and they moved her to solitary for 3 days. After that, she stopped asking, but she never stopped praying. And then, one morning, weeks after the article, days after Olivia's suspension, a guard came to her cell, held out a manila envelope. didn't say a word. Inside it, a printed photo, grainy, black and white, from a surveillance camera. A little boy, curled in a blanket, holding a spoon, and on the back, written in sharp, hurried ink, "He's alive, I promise." No name, no signature, but Marisol knew. She pressed the photo to her lips, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Gracias, thank you. Just let him remember me." But the system was moving faster now, colder. The judge had seen the headlines, heard the calls for her resignation. The governor was asking questions. The media wanted answers. So she did what people like her always do when they're cornered. She retaliated. Within 48 hours, Marisol was called back into court. No warning, no lawyer. And this time, the judge didn't speak in legal terms. She spoke in venom. "Your child has been placed for adoption. Your parental rights have been terminated due to abandonment. You will be deported within the month." The room spun. Marisol couldn't breathe. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Just one sentence echoed in her mind over and over like a death toll. "He won't even remember your name." But that night, in the foster home across town, the little boy woke up screaming, not in fear, not in pain, but with one word on his lips, one word he'd never been taught, never heard anyone say. "Mama." The lights never turned off completely, even at night, even when the women begged for darkness, for sleep, for a little dignity. Marisol lay on the hard cot, face turned to the wall, photo hidden beneath her shirt. Heartbeats slowing into prayer. They had taken everything, her name, her child, her country, but they hadn't taken the dream. It began in silence as dreams often do. Then the dust came, slow, like mist rising from the ground. And in the center of it, a figure, small, barefoot, wrapped in a t-shirt. He was standing in the middle of the desert, but there was no sun, only shadows, only wind. He didn't cry, didn't move, just looked at her, eyes full of old knowing, like he remembered her womb and everything that came after. She tried to run to him, feet heavy, limbs frozen. The desert pulled at her ankles like hands of the forgotten. But the boy lifted his hand, and when he did, the dust parted. Behind him, a woman appeared, tall, wearing a robe made of light and ashes. No face, just presence. She touched the boy's shoulder, and he whispered, "Estoy aquí, Mama." "I'm here, Mama." Marisol woke in tears, but not fear, not sorrow, hope, real, heavy, alive. That morning, the guard brought her something unexpected. A Bible, used, pages dog-eared, smelled like old sweat and disinfectant. But inside, tucked between Exodus and Isaiah, was a folded note, just a single line written in shaky blue pen. "He knows your name." Oh, there was no signature, but she didn't need one. She pressed the note to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Señor, no me quites mi fe." "Lord, don't take my faith from me." But faith, like fire, burns brighter when the darkness comes, and the darkness was coming, because just down the hallway, the Department of Homeland Security had made a decision. They were going to deport her, without telling her where her child was, without giving her a moment to hold him, without mercy. Just a number, a flight, and a silence. But someone else had heard the dream, and that someone was ready to fight back. The reporter's name was Noah. Brown skin, soft eyes, tired heart. He had grown up in a house full of women, a mother who cleaned motels, a sister who raised 2 kids on food stamps, a grandmother who still lit candles for the Virgin every night. He knew what silence cost. So when the email came, anonymous, urgent, trembling through the screen, he listened. He played the courtroom recording once, twice, then a third time. Each word from the judge cut like glass. "You people. Motherhood is not a license. Crime against America." He knew this wasn't just a story. It was a wound. So he drove, straight to Tucson. No hotel, no time. He wanted to find the voice in the silence. The church was boarded up now. Since the photo went viral, they'd been threatened, vandalized, but Brother Samuel was still there. still sweeping the front steps like nothing had happened. Noah introduced himself. The old pastor didn't say much, just offered coffee and a chair. They sat in the heat, flies buzzing, air thick with something unsaid. Then Noah pulled out the photo, the one from the altar, the baby, the note, the cross. Brother Samuel looked at it for a long time, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then he said, "That boy was quiet like wind through the graveyard." But his silence said everything. Noah leaned in, and the pastor whispered, "You're not the first to ask questions." He stood, walked to the back room, came out with a cassette tape, old, crackling, labeled in black ink, "Confession." He handed it to Noah. "She came to me before the birth, asked if God could forgive what she was about to do. Said she didn't want to die in the desert with her child in her arms." Noah took the tape with both hands, like it was holy, because it was. Inside that plastic shell was a voice that had never been heard, a woman begging for mercy in a country that offered none. He didn't know yet, but what she said on that tape was going to change everything. But before he could leave the church, his phone rang, blocked number, static, then a child's voice, shaky, broken, real. "I remember the song my mama sang." Noah froze, because the voice wasn't on speaker, it was in his earpiece, private. No one should have had this number. And yet, the silence had just spoken. Noah didn't sleep that night, didn't eat, didn't blink for long. He sat alone in a motel room, tape deck on the desk, his hands trembling like old prayer beads as the cassette whirred to life. Then, her voice, soft, worn, woven with dust and faith. "If you're listening to this," she began, "I need you to know I didn't leave him because I wanted to. I left him because it was the only way to keep him breathing." She told her story in fragments, memories held together by pain. The crossing, the hunger, the contractions beneath moonlight. "I thought I was going to die out there," she whispered. "But I kept walking. Not for me, for him." Noah closed his eyes, felt her voice climb into his bones, felt the room tilt beneath the weight of truth. She spoke of the church, the altar, the moment she kissed her newborn's forehead and laid him beneath the cross. "I left a note. Not because I wanted to be forgiven," she said, "but because I needed God to know my heart was breaking." Then silence, a long pause, and finally, "Please, whoever finds this, don't let them erase me." Noah wept, not loudly, not for show, but the kind of weeping that comes from recognizing your mother's voice in a stranger's grief. He knew what he had to do. He called the network, demanded airtime, told them it wasn't a story, it was a reckoning, but they hesitated. Too controversial, too anti-American. So Noah went another way. He uploaded the tape, raw, unedited, posted it with one line. "She was never a criminal. She was a mother." And the internet caught fire. Within hours, the tape had been translated, shared, screamed, sung, turned into protest chants, graffiti sermons. People knelt outside ICE facilities holding candles and baby shoes, whispering her name, Marisol. But in the detention center, Marisol didn't know. The guards didn't tell her. The chaplain didn't come. She just sat, as she always did, photo clutched in her hand, face turned to the cement wall, waiting. And then Olivia appeared, back from suspension, hair uncombed, eyes fierce. She didn't ask permission, didn't knock, just walked into the cell and said, "They heard you, Marisol. They finally heard you." The next morning, the protest reached the courthouse steps. Women in white, men with signs, children holding drawings of a baby on an altar. They didn't scream. They didn't chant. They stood in silence, the kind of silence that cannot be ignored. Olivia walked Marisol into the courtroom herself. No chains this time, no cuffs, just dignity. The judge entered through the back, different one now. The other had recused herself after public pressure, after leaked emails showed bias, after America finally looked in the mirror and didn't like what it saw. The new judge was younger, Latina, sharp eyes, voice calm like a storm just before it breaks. She asked for silence. But the room was already silent, because everyone there knew this moment mattered. Noah sat in the back row, notebook in hand, heart pounding. The foster system sent no one, not a single face to represent the child. But Olivia had brought someone, a boy, skin warm like sun, eyes deep like scripture, barely walking, but already watching the world. Yes, it was him, Isaias. When Marisol saw him, she didn't scream, didn't run, didn't collapse. She just stood, straight, still, sacred. Tears slid down her cheeks like rain down church windows. And the boy, he tilted his head, took one step forward, then another, then lifted his tiny hand and pointed at her. "Mama," he whispered. The courtroom broke. Some wept, some gasped. The judge lowered her head, and then Marisol knelt, not from weakness, but from reverence. She whispered, "Gracias, Dios." Thank you, God. Because even after all they took, after all they erased, her child remembered her, not by name, but by soul. But just as Olivia reached to bring Isaias forward, a bailiff stepped between them. "He's not hers anymore, not legally." The judge raised her hand, spoke low. "Then let's fix that." The courtroom leaned in. Outside, the silence began to tremble, like something holy was about to roar. The judge sat back in her chair, eyes closed, breathing deep. "Then," she began, "the law has its language," she said, "but justice has its own voice." She spoke slow, clear, like every word weighed 1,000 years. This mother was criminalized for choosing life, for seeking sanctuary, for handing her child to God when no man would help her. She paused, looked out at the rows of people, some crying, some holding hands, all waiting. What America witnessed was not abandonment. It was survival, faith, love. Then she turned to Marisol. "You are not invisible anymore." And with the strike of the gavel, the court ruled. Parental rights restored. Custody reinstated. Deportation order dismissed. The courtroom didn't erupt. It exhaled, like a wound releasing its final breath. Marisol stood, arms open, and Isaias ran. Fell into her like rain into dry earth. No words, just the sound of two heartbeats finding their rhythm again. Olivia wept. Noah stood frozen. Even the judge turned her eyes away. Outside, the protest turned into a hymn. Soft voices, untrained but holy. "Ella no es illegal. Ella es mamá." She is not illegal. She is a mother. The headlines flipped overnight. From fugitive to mother, Marisol's story touches a nation. Leaked tape forces, systemic review of immigration courts. "I left him at God's feet." One mother's sacrifice and return. But Marisol didn't read the news, didn't chase cameras, didn't seek revenge. She just held her son, smelled his hair, rocked him to sleep, and sang, finally, the lullaby she'd carried across deserts, cages, judgment, and time. But the system, it wasn't done. Because dignity may win the moment, but power doesn't give up easy. And just as they packed to leave Tucson, Olivia got a call. Blocked number, deep voice. They're not happy she won. They're watching her now. They left Tucson before sunrise. 3 bags, 1 child, no map. The air smelled of engine oil and quiet fear. Marisol sat in the back seat, Isaias asleep in her lap, Olivia at the wheel, eyes scanning every rear-view mirror like a psalm of survival. Noah had given them cash. Enough for a few nights, no questions, but even with freedom granted, they didn't feel free. Not yet, not really. Because in America, sometimes the cage comes with you, follows you, lingers in shadows and mailboxes and government forms that still call you alien. They reached a safe house just outside Albuquerque, church-run, quiet, thick curtains, a woman named Miriam at the door with a voice like wind through pine. She gave Marisol a room, clean sheets, a toothbrush, a worn children's book. "You're safe here," Miriam whispered. But safety, Marisol knew, was never just a place. It was a season, a breath. That night, Isaias didn't sleep. He clung to her shirt, eyes wide, as if remembering the foster homes, the strangers, the silence. So she stayed up, rocking him slowly, humming that same old tune, her voice cracked, but steady. Outside, a car passed by, then another, then silence again, and then a knock. 3 soft taps, too slow to be urgent, too deliberate to be kind. Miriam froze, looked through the peephole, then turned to Marisol. "Don't open the door." But the knock came again, and this time a voice, low, masculine, accent hidden like a blade in cloth. "We just want to ask a few questions." Marisol held Isaias tight, felt his tiny heartbeat galloping under her fingers. Olivia grabbed the phone, dialed a number. No answer. The man outside spoke again. "You think you won something, Senora?" "The system doesn't forget." Then footsteps, then silence. By the time they opened the door, no one was there, just a paper folded on the porch, typed, precise, no name. "Next time we won't knock." Miriam locked the door, bolted it, placed a chair beneath the knob like it was 1965 again, like time had folded itself into fear. Olivia didn't sleep that night, sat by the window with a kitchen knife in her lap, phone in her hand, eyes swollen with exhaustion and rage. Marisol stayed curled on the floor, Isaias asleep on her chest, his breath shallow, his fingers tangled in her hair. They stayed like that until morning, and when the sun crept through the blinds, Marisol rose like a mother rising from the tomb. She looked at the paper again, that warning. "Next time, we won't knock." And she did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote. With shaking hands, on the back of a receipt, in broken English and holy Spanish, she wrote a letter. Not to the government, not to the press, but to him, her son, mi hijo. "If one day you find this, and I'm not there, I want you to know that I loved you so much, that I broke myself so you could be whole." She folded it, placed it inside the back of his baby book, taped it shut, and gave it to Miriam. "If something happens to me," she said, "give him this when he's old enough to remember me with kindness." Miriam didn't ask questions, just nodded. Because women like her knew that sometimes love comes wrapped in goodbyes. But that afternoon something changed. Noah called. He was breathless, out of state, but furious. "They're trying to bury the story," he said. "ICE says the tape was faked, that you abandoned him on purpose. They're spinning it. And worse, they had filed a motion to reopen her deportation case on grounds of public disorder, fraudulent media manipulation, national security risks." It was starting again. But this time, Noah had something else. "There's one person left who can testify for you. Someone who saw you that night, before the church, before the baby." Marisol's voice broke. "Who?" Noah was quiet. Then, "Your cousin. The one who gave you the ride to the border. She's in Atlanta, she's scared, but she's ready." And that's when Marisol remembered. A night under stars, a red car, a voice that said, "I can't go with you, but I won't let you walk alone." Now, that same voice was coming back to the story, but so was the storm, because someone else had heard the news, and someone was already on their way. Her name was Luz, Spanish for light. But her life had been all fire, burned palms from years in hotel kitchens, burned hopes from 20 years of hiding, burned bridges with the family that never forgave her for helping Marisol disappear that night. But she remembered, every second, the panic in Marisol's eyes, the blood on her seat, the whisper, "If I don't do this, he'll die inside me." Luz hadn't heard from her since, until last week, when a strange man called, reporter, soft voice, telling her the world was about to tear her cousin apart again. So she got on a bus, from Atlanta to Albuquerque, 36 hours, no ID, just faith. She arrived with nothing but a plastic bag, a photo of Marisol when they were 9, and a Bible wrapped in a t-shirt. When Marisol opened the door and saw her, neither woman spoke. They just held each other for a long, long time. Later that night, Luz sat across from Olivia and Noah, told them everything. The ride to the edge of the desert, how Marisol couldn't even sit upright from the contractions, how she tried to call 911 but knew they wouldn't come for someone like us, how she said, "I'm not leaving him to die." Noah recorded everything, and when Luce finished, he looked at Marisol and said, This changes everything." But then, a sound. Car tires, fast, crackling gravel. Everyone froze, and for a second the whole house held its breath. Isaias looked up from his toy, eyes wide, nostrils flared. Then, a voice outside. "Open the door. We have a warrant." But something in that tone was wrong. Too fast, too hungry. Olivia whispered, "That's not how ice talks." And Marisol knew that voice, had heard it in court, in dreams. The judge, the one who'd called her a terrorist. She was there, outside, and she wasn't alone. The door rattled, hard, like it had fists instead of hinges. Luce grabbed Isaias and backed into the hallway. Miriam pressed a crucifix to her lips. Noah hit record, and Olivia stepped forward like a soldier made of fire. "You have no jurisdiction here," she said, voice low, hands steady, but her heartbeat was like thunder in a glass cup. Then the judge spoke. From the other side, her voice clearer than ever. "I came to see the damage myself, to remind you all that this land still has laws." But what she meant was ownership. What she meant was power. What she meant was, you people don't win. Marisol stepped into the room, hair tied back, shirt borrowed, soul intact. She held her son against her hip, and for the first time did not look down. "You already judged me," she said, "but God didn't." The room fell still. Even Isaias turned to look at her, like he felt the moment opening beneath their feet. The judge sneered. "You lied to the world. You manipulated the system." Marisol didn't flinch, didn't answer her rage with rage, just opened her Bible, turned to a page, held up a note, the one from the altar. "This is what I left. Not a lie, a prayer." Then she walked forward, placed the note on the floor beneath the crack of the door. "You can burn papers, you can twist stories, but you can't erase a mother's prayer." The judge didn't respond for a long time. Then, footsteps, fading, silence, and when they opened the door, she was gone. No warrant, no car, no explanation, just the sound of defeat trying not to sound like it. Later that night, Olivia got the call from Washington. "We're reopening the investigation against the judge. She overstepped. We want Marisol to testify, on record, live, on the floor of Congress." The system that tried to bury her was now asking her to speak, and for the first time in all her life, Marisol said, "Yes." But before they could book the flight, before they could buy the clothes, before they could tell Isaias he was going to see the stars, a letter arrived. No return address, no postmark. Inside, a photograph. Isaias, at the altar. But this time, the note was missing, and someone had written in red ink, "He remembers, but so do we." Washington was colder than she imagined. The air cut different there, not like desert wind, not like cell-block dampness, but like marble. Like judgment wearing perfume. Marisol wore a borrowed dress, too loose in the shoulders, too tight in the ribs, as if the fabric didn't yet know how to hold a woman who had survived what she had. Olivia walked beside her. Luce held Isaias in the front row. Noah had flown in from Arizona, and somewhere in the back of the room, Miriam prayed under her breath. The hearing chamber was full. Senators, cameras, reporters with polished pens but rusty hearts. Marisol sat, placed both hands on the table, and waited. The chairman called her name. Miss Marisol Santos. She didn't correct him, didn't say, "It's Senora," didn't remind them that she was a mother before she was anything else. She just leaned into the mic and began. "I did not come here to speak English perfectly. I did not come here to make anyone comfortable. I came here to tell you what it costs to be forgotten." Her voice didn't shake. It rose, not like a scream, but like a psalm carried by wind through courtroom stone and human doubt. "You call us illegal, but I walked through fire for my child. You call us irresponsible, but I left him in the house of God when I had no house of my own." She paused, let silence do what words could not. Then she reached into her Bible, pulled out the photo, the one from that church, and held it up for the whole world to see. This is what faith looks like. Some senators lowered their eyes. Others stared at the ground as if it had swallowed their shame. Then she finished. You judged me for leaving him, but I was never gone. My love was in the air he breathed, in the blanket he held, in the name I gave him before your system tried to take it away. Isaias. It means, the Lord is salvation. The chamber went quiet. Even the cameras forgot to click. And in that quiet, Isaiah stood up from Lucy's lap, walked down the aisle, one step, then another, reached the microphone, placed both hands on the wood just like his mother had, and whispered, "She didn't abandon me. She chose me." It was over. And yet, everything had just begun, because that video traveled to homes, to schools, to mothers hiding in shelters, and daughters cleaning hotels, and little boys in foster homes, who finally believed they were not a mistake. Marisol never got revenge, but she got something greater. She got her dignity back. And when IC came again, they came not with chains, but with apologies. The judge resigned. New policies were written, but none of that mattered as much as this. One night, months later, Marisol stood on the porch of a new home. Small, safe, hers. And Isaiah stood beside her, looking up at the stars. He said, "Mama, look," and pointed to the sky. There, a paper lantern floated by. Soft light, silent grace. She smiled, held his hand, because she knew they had tried to lock her voice in a cage. But her story had taken flight, traveled across airwaves, across hearts, across borders men thought could never be crossed, traveled across paper skies. If this story touched something inside you, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because there are truths that don't need to be shouted. They just need to be whispered with enough faith that the world begins to listen.